I have just got back from watching the Transformers 40th anniversary, as the background can show you here. And I just thought I'd like to record some of my thoughts on it. The whole thing started with a trailer for Earthspark. Now, I've not seen Earthspark. I've seen images of Earthspark, but I've never really thought that it's something that it would appeal to me, being someone who has grown up essentially with Transformers ever since it first came out. The the animation is very different. I won't speak much on it, but what I will say is that when they got Skywarp zipping around, I thought it was quite fun to see him actual. Sorry, not him, her, because it's a female in Earthspark. To see Skywarp using teleportation so quickly. Zipping all over the place, teleport here, then bam, 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 in combat and out of combat. Because in Generation 1, he would use it a couple of times, maybe, just here and there, and that'd be it. But it's limitations of the technology at the time would probably have an effect on that, because it's all cell shaded, hand animated stuff. As opposed to Earthspark, which, as far as I know, is all computer generated, so you can just kind of do a lightning flash effect, bang, up the screen, there you go, move, start Skywarp over here, job done. Then it actually went into the showing properly. It went, this is the latest thing that's coming out, and here is how it started. And you got a whole bunch of the originals on there, and by originals I mean people who were in the 80s. So you can't see because I'm kind of blocking some of it, unfortunately. But Michael Bell, Greg Berger, Peter Cullen, Paul Eiding, Frank Welker, Dan Gilvezan, they were all there in the 80s, whether they were pre-movie, in for the movie itself, or post-movie. And in addition, you had Arif Kinchin and Frank Tadaro, who I had to look up because I'm unfamiliar with the names. Sorry, I'm not a true Transformers fan. Arg. They were joined in around like 2018. They did theirs, Transformers. And you can kind of see, watching it, how some of the actors there, like they describe it, sitting in one big recording room, and just all together, all in the recording room, and with the script down, they were like, we weren't sure if we were able to get back into these roles, but then as soon as the script dropped, and they were just straight back into it, just like that. And you could see it. You could actually see it on screen, with some of them able, just reading straight off the script, because as far as we know there wasn't the animation playing. Some of them reading straight off the script and getting the tone of the original character they played, and the pacing just spot on, with the lip syncing actually in the animation. And it's just like, obviously you can tell that they knew exactly what was going on, and it's like, it's straight it's in the mind, 40 years ago, bang, straight back in it, and able to just go as if it was yesterday. And with apologies, I'm going to call them the new guys, Arif Kinchin and Frank Tadaro, because they weren't in the 1984. They were very, very good, I thought, at coming in and picking up the roles that were laid down by, primarily by Scatman Crothers and Chris Lasser. who they were essentially picking up from. And watching it and listening to them, I very much appreciated how they kind of tried to fit, from my perspective, with the original performance. So they didn't kind of throw their own take on the characters. They were like, oh no, here we are. Frank Todaro did the voice of Starscream, and I apologise that I know there were more than just the one character you did, but it's kind of as an example. He managed to actually get that high-pitched latter voice from my opinion of it, and it felt like it fit in with everything else. Obviously, some of them weren't there. So the 80s crew, some of them weren't there, as far as I can tell, in the original 84. But obviously, we have unfortunately lost people who were there, and they're filling in the roles for them. There were a couple of fudges that we did see. Primarily, one I can remember is Frank Welker as Soundwave, saying how they can store the energy in energon tubes rather than energon cubes. Now, understandable, because when we get to the end of episode 1, because episode 1 was what the recording, essentially the live recording was, and they're talking about how everybody being in that room, they just fell back into the atmosphere that was in the original recording booths and original recording at the time, which was people were just having a bit of a joke around and trying to make each other laugh. Anecdotally, I believe Dan Gilvezan, I think, when he was at a UK Transformers convention quite a few years ago, said that it was either, I think it was said it was Chris Latta, who would just be constantly making everyone laugh all the time, and that atmosphere just seemed to apparently rise up, and people were just making each other laugh and fudging lines and having to restart again. It's great to kind of see that even after all these years. It's just all, it's reminiscing for us who were there in the you're witnessing the show come out for the first time, and also them who were the guys who are the voices, the characters essentially behind the screen, just falling straight back into that camaraderie again. But there were a couple of bits in there that were the original audio of the characters. So again, although Frank Welker was doing Soundwave and Megatron, and some of them were like straight after each other, bam bam, character after character, and they just switched the voice. In the beginning section on Cybertron, when you first introduced to Megatron, prior to that, you've got Frank Welker doing the voice of Soundwave, and then you get Soundwave coming into the room, and it's the original version with the audio processing over the top, and then Frank Welker then voices Megatron. Paul Eiding, I think it was Paul Eiding who did the voice of Shockwave, and Shockwave is probably remarkably difficult to do, I'd imagine, because it's that very kind of, it's not quite monotone, but it's more kind of just a subdued kind of way of speaking. And the way he did it, he did it a little bit too fast in conjunction with the animation. So watching the flashing eye of Shockwave, which was originally in time with the original voice acting. But the voice acting was going a little bit fast for the actual animation. But, like I say, as far as we're aware, there wasn't the animation on screen. It was just the guys in a room with mics over the top of them and scripts. So, it's understandable that they wouldn't be able to perfectly match note for note. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing that they did, or didn't in some cases. It's kind of a noticeable change from someone who can remember watching the originals and still have the originals. I've got them on my shelf up here. After that, so that was Generation 1, Season 1, Episode 1, More Than Meets the Eye, Part 1. Then you had the kind of an outtake of the guys in the table. Then you went into Episode 2, so More Than Meets the Eye, Episode 2, More Than Meets the Eye, Episode 3, and Transport to Oblivion, which were Episodes 2, 3, and 4. Now, those were the originals, so they literally were the original works back up on screen, and I enjoyed it as a trip down memory lane. Although I would say one niggle from watching it at the cinema was that I feel it was too loud. So, specifically in Transport to Oblivion, there were action scenes that were going on, music, characters voicing, laser blasts, and the volume of it just kind of mixed all those sounds together into kind of an amorphous sound blob, if you will. It's definitely something that could do with having the volume turned down a bit so that you can more appreciate it rather than having all the noise all there all at the same time and it coming overwhelming, especially for somebody who has autism. That would be very overwhelming. I can see that being very overwhelming. I do have autism, but I don't have the audio autism, so I'm okay with it. But yeah, I mean, it was also fun sitting there and watching and going, oh yeah, back on that big screen, you can more clearly make out the visual errors, because visual errors were all over the place in some of these, where you have color palette swaps. So you've just got two. Again, Transport to Oblivion, you've got Starscream who steps forward, and you have a Seeker behind him who steps forward, and he looks exactly the same as Starscream because the model was the same. It was just a different palette swap, and they just kind of messed up a little bit and put Starscream in there. At one point, Megatron's moving his hand around, and it's in front of the Decepticon badge, and when he moves his hand away, that section of the badge is missing because they just forgot to fill it in when they were doing it. More Than Meets the Eye Part 2, they're at the Sherman Dam, and you have Prowl move. You can see the Prowl's got the animation, but it's Optimus Prime's voice. So again, that was a recording. They did the recording, and presumably it was changed in the final edit, and they decided it was going to be Prowl that was going to say a line, but they couldn't re-record it, so they just had to go with what was there. All that kind of stuff. So it's an interesting step down memory lane, seeing that up there again, and how that's not really something you're going to see with modern Transformers anymore. It's very much a product of its time, especially because it's CG is, you got the character file, you just drag the file and you put it on and you make it do the stuff. There was, however, right at the very end, a PSA. Now, living in England and having watched the syndication that we got, I don't ever remember there being Transformers PSAs, but we had one, and it was a kid and his friend. The kid had run away from home, and he was going, "Oh, I'm running away from home, but I'm going to show my mum how tough I am, because I'm not going to put up with it." And they step out, and Bumblebee drives up and transforms, and he's like, "Oh, to show you're really tough, you should go home and you should talk about things, talk about your feelings, talk about what's going on, and resolve issues." And the kid goes, "Oh yeah, now I know." And Bumblebee says, "Well, and knowing is half the battle." And in my head, I went, "That's what they got at the end of G.I. Joe." Oh, that was a G.I. Joe PSA, just with Transformers over the top of it. And I was quite amused. A little bit cringy, but amused because I've never seen that before. But yeah, overall, I enjoyed it. I'd say I enjoyed it overall. Yes, there are niggles, but this is getting everyone together, or those that you can get together, after 40 years and telling them, chucking down strips and saying, "Do it again." You can't expect perfection. Arif Kinchin, Frank Tadaro, big thanks to you guys for respecting the originals. Everyone else, big respect for being able to step back into those shoes, or taking up the roles of those, as I said earlier, who can't anymore because they're no longer with us. But that's it. I'm going to go now. If you can see it, do. Now, down my way, there's only, by the time I produce this and have it shipped out, there's only be 3 more showings in my local cinema. Who knows any other cinema? I got no idea. But if you see this and you think, "Oh, I'm on the fence," go see it, because it'll give you a nice juxtaposed insight. Juxtaposed is the right word, but it's the one I'm using, into the latest, how it is now and how it is then, as well as getting to see the guys who, essentially without them putting the iconic voices in, we wouldn't have what we have today. So go see it if you can. If you can't, try and find the original DVDs or something, but don't get the Metrodome version, because they overload it with sound effects, and it's not a decent callback. But that'll do. Bye bye.